Windows 365 is the new cloud PC from Microsoft. But what is it? Is it worth your money? And don't they already have a cloud PC? Let's talk. Welcome back to the Pro Tech Show. Let's address the obvious question first. What is a cloud PC? Instead of going to the shop, buying a computer and putting it on your desk, you rent one from Microsoft and it lives in their data center. When you want to use it, you walk over to their data center and... No, of course you don't. Even if there is a data center near you, they're not going to let you just walk into it. So what you actually do is you connect to your computer over the internet. That's why they call it a cloud PC, because it lives somewhere in the cloud, and you connect to it using the internet. You may have spotted a flaw in this plan. If your computer lives somewhere on the internet, what do you connect to it with? Your other computer. It's not as silly as it sounds. The Windows 365 Cloud PC acts just like any other computer running Windows 10 or Windows 11 depending on when you watch this. You can install software on it, store your files on it. It acts just like a regular computer. Unlike a regular computer, you don't need to have it physically next to you in order to use it. You just need to have internet access on something. That something could be another computer. Maybe you buy a really cheap laptop. It doesn't have to be any good, it just needs to connect to your cloud PC. You could have a really old, janky computer that's no longer fit for purpose, and instead of upgrading it, you rent a cloud PC and use the old one to connect to it. Now you're sat at your janky old computer, but it's performing like a new computer because your physical device is just acting as a keyboard, mouse and monitor, with the actual computing experience streaming live from the cloud. Or you go to a friend's house or another office and you connect to your cloud PC using one of their computers. The experience you get is of sitting down at your own computer, just using someone else's keyboard to access it. This works on a Mac too, so you could be using a Mac, click a button, and it's like you're running Windows 10 from your Mac. In fact, it'll also work on a tablet, or you could even access your Windows 10 desktop from your phone. Whatever physical device you use is just a remote control conduit to get you to your PC in the cloud. This isn't a new concept. Companies call it a Virtual Desktop Infrastructure or VDI. The big difference between this and traditional VDI is that it's a completely managed service. You don't need to build a complicated server infrastructure to run it. You just give Microsoft some money and here's your cloud PC. You might still be thinking that this all sounds eerily familiar. And you would be correct. This is not Microsoft's first cloud PC service. It is in fact based on Microsoft's existing Azure Virtual Desktop service, previously called Windows Virtual Desktop. We are going to come back to this comparison later, but for now, the headline differences are that Windows 365 is a much more simplified experience and it has a fixed price, so it's more accessible to people not used to dealing with VDI, and the cost doesn't change depending on how you use it, but you get less control over it. It's for people who don't want to worry too much about the underlying management of it and just want to get up and running with minimal fuss. On the topic of pricing, what do you get for your money and is it a good deal? I'm going to have to do this in two sections because it's one of those where you really do need to consider the bigger picture. If you just price match this against buying a computer, it's terrible value. But you're also missing the point. It's not really aimed at home users, but as it is Microsoft's more accessible cloud PC service, there will be some home users who are interested in using it, as well as small sole trader sorts of businesses. I will do that comparison against a standard physical computer, using the computer I'm editing this video on as benchmark. But stick around for the business pricing comparison because that makes things much more interesting. Let's jump into the numbers though, and then we'll look at how this translates to performance. Windows 365 comes in various sizes and two editions. Those editions are Business and Enterprise. Business is simpler and limited to 300 users. Enterprise is intended to integrate with Microsoft Endpoint Manager and has no user limit. Fortunately for this comparison, the base prices for both are the same, so which you choose is a matter of scale and how much management control you want to have. The cheapest option is £20.50 per month, and for that you get a glorified calculator running Windows. One vCPU, 2GB of RAM, and a 64GB hard drive is not going to get you very far. You can't even run Microsoft Office on it. For most users, this is not going to be a good experience. You can run a web browser in it, slowly, and that's probably about it. Ironically, you can access your Cloud PC through a web browser, and the browser you're using to do that will probably be faster. The top-end option comes with 8 vCPUs, 32GB of RAM, and 512GB of storage. For that, you'll pay the princely sum of £138 per month, which is not cheap. And is also really vague. Like, what does it mean when it says you get 8 vCPUs? Is that the same as an 8-core processor? No. Well, it could be, but what it really means is whatever Microsoft wants it to mean. Let me explain. A vCPU is a virtual CPU core. 8 vCPUs means your Cloud PC will show an 8-core processor, but it's not real. Your Cloud PC is a virtual construct that attaches to host hardware and accesses a share of it. That hardware can change, and it's shared with other Cloud PCs as well. The actual processors being used are big server processors with lots and lots of cores. You're getting a slice of that, or in this case, 8 slices. Those 8 vCPU slices could literally map to 8 physical cores, but they could also be 4 physical cores and 4 hyperthreads. Hyperthreading is a way of speeding up multitasking. It pretends to be an extra set of CPU cores so Windows will send it work to do, but they aren't real cores so they can't process anything. It does speed things up by queuing work up more efficiently for the real cores, but nowhere near as much as an extra CPU core would speed things up. The vCPUs on your Cloud PC could be representing hyperthreads as real cores, or they could even be over-provisioned. Over-provisioning is when you have more virtual CPUs than physical CPUs. Most of the time processors aren't running at full tilt and don't need all of the cores, so if you match them one-to-one, you're wasting resources. Instead, you could share physical cores between a larger number of virtual cores belonging to different Cloud PCs. As long as a bunch of them don't try and run a heavy workload all at the same time, you probably wouldn't notice any difference. If other customers started using their Cloud PCs more heavily though, and it is over-provisioned, you might find yours slowing down as a result. The problem with Windows 365 is it doesn't tell you anywhere how their vCPUs are provisioned. Are they one-to-one with physical cores? Are they counting hyperthreads as cores? Are they over-provisioned, and if so, what's the ratio? I haven't found anything to answer those questions definitively, but take a look here. We know that Windows 365 is delivered using the same infrastructure as Azure Virtual Desktops, and I've seen several people using the mid to high tier Windows 365 PCs, all of which reported the processor shown as an Intel Xeon 8272CL. There were others in lower tier PCs. The Azure standard D8 V4 virtual machine size matches the top tier Windows 365 specification in terms of vCPUs and memory. The DV4 family has configurations that match the medium tier options as well, and it uses the same Intel Xeon 8272CL processor. Furthermore, I have checked this virtual machine size against screenshots and videos running Windows 365 Cloud PCs, and confirmed that the CPUs are running at exactly the same frequency. Which is important because Microsoft say these are custom chips specifically for Azure, and they match. This doesn't 100% guarantee that the top tier Windows 365 option is definitely an Azure D8 V4 virtual machine, but I cannot find any difference in the spec, the CPU model, or the clock frequency. In the absence of documentation for Windows 365, then if I look at the documentation for these virtual machines, it tells us the physical CPUs have hyperthreading enabled, and the virtual CPU to physical core ratio is 2:1. I take that to mean that the 8 virtual CPU cores consist of 4 real cores and 4 hyperthreads. That's not the same thing as having an actual 8-core processor. In fact, it's actually having one quad-core processor with hyperthreading enabled. This is fairly normal with virtualization, but I think a lot of people seeing 8 vCPUs would assume it's the equivalent of an 8-core processor, not a quad-core. The very fact that I can't definitively figure out what I'm buying isn't really good enough in my opinion. In fact, I have contacted Microsoft's CSP cloud licensing partners about this, and they don't have any more information about it either. It's a similar story with RAM and storage. RAM speed is much less important than capacity for most applications, so I'll let them off of that one, but what about storage? Azure offers multiple tiers of SSD, and based off the benchmarks I've seen of Windows 365 storage, it appears to be using the slowest tier. It's faster than a mechanical drive, but not by that much. It was less than half the speed of the SSD in my computer, and mine's a pretty average drive. My intention for the next part of this video was to do a bit of performance testing on Windows 365. But unfortunately, Microsoft have cancelled the trials of Windows 365, so the only way for me to try it now is to purchase a full month up front. And I don't want to do that, particularly because their biggest cloud PC in theory matches my editing PC specification, 8 cores, 32 gigs of RAM and an SSD, so that's the one I want to test. But I don't fancy paying the equivalent of $230 for the privilege of running a 10-minute benchmark. I will show you the performance of that Azure Virtual Desktop though, the one with the matching specification, because I think you'll find it interesting to see what kind of performance Microsoft's 8 vCPU Xeon 8272CL actually delivers. Even though it's expensive because it's build based on usage, I can run the benchmark, then delete it, and it will cost me pennies. Now this is interesting and confirms my interpretation of the vCPU provisioning. If we look in Task Manager inside this cloud PC, it shows 8 virtual processors. If we look at what Cinebench says though, it has identified them as 4 cores and 8 threads. That is the equivalent to a quad-core processor with hyperthreading enabled, just as I thought. Not an 8-core as it may first appear. That is going to impact our benchmark score. And yeah, it's a pretty poor result, scoring just 4,327 points in Cinebench R23. For context, the computer I'm editing this video on has an actual 8-core processor in it, and it scored 12,335 points in the same test. That's nearly treble the score, and this isn't a top-end chip. It's a Ryzen 7 3700X. It's a good chip, but it's last gen, and it was the slowest of the 8-core chips from that AMD generation on general sale, so it's not a top performer. Apart from PBO, it's running at stock settings with air cooling. This is why I think Microsoft needs to be more upfront about what you're getting. Because these machines are advertised as having 8 vCPUs, and it is reasonable to assume that it should be roughly comparable to a last-gen 8-core processor like this. But instead, they get absolutely decimated by it. With the Azure Virtual Desktops, you can look this detail up and see what you're getting. But with Windows 365, they just don't tell you. If Microsoft reopen the official trials in time for me to update this video before going live, then I'll rerun the benchmarks on an actual Windows 365 PC. But they're both advertised as the same specification, by the same vendor, and share the same underlying hardware, so I don't expect much difference. Quick note, no, they didn't reopen the trials, but a guy in Australia did run Cinebench on Windows 365. Same processor, and 50% of his vCPUs were hyperthreads, same as my test in Azure. So if you're buying a cloud PC, take the number of CPU cores you want, double that number, and that's how many vCPUs to buy. By the way, if you're wondering about gaming on Windows 365, don't. The answer to can it run Crysis is a resounding no. They don't have GPUs yet, but that is on the roadmap for later. Honestly though, you'd be better off with a game streaming service because I found the latency annoying just navigating around Windows. It's using the Windows Remote Desktop protocol, which is good for administrative work, but not for latency sensitive applications like gaming. So the performance of virtual desktops in Azure is a little underwhelming. What I will say they do have going for them though is a seriously fast internet connection. Something to do with running inside Microsoft's data center, right? I was interested to see if it would be a good use case for video editing because my internet sucks, and I really like the idea of rendering out a video then uploading it in seconds instead of hours. But Windows 365 simply can't run my editing software. I use DaVinci Resolve, which needs a dedicated GPU. They haven't got one. If they did, it doesn't work over remote desktop when I've tried it. Even if it did, Microsoft's 8 vCPU processors just aren't up to the task either. So it's a bust for me, I'm afraid. Let's be honest though, gaming and video editing aren't the intended use cases for this. Actually, apparently video editing is an intended use case. It lists content creation as an example scenario for this 8 vCPU machine. Let's be honest, it's really for regular office work, so how does it stack up price-wise? It's time for that comparison against my PC first, and then the more businessy scenario. Let's stick with the top-end machine. It's got the same amount of memory as my computer, half the storage, albeit much slower, and in theory a similar processor, but in practice I expect based on the Azure results that it's likely to be about a third as powerful. Computer prices are all over the place at the moment, so I'm just going to use the price I paid a couple of years ago. Windows 365 doesn't have a graphics card though, so I'll deduct that from the cost at its original price, not current scalper pricing. That means my computer cost about £940 back when I bought it. I tend to upgrade after about 5 years, so let's compare this against the cost of Windows 365 machine for 5 years. For the sake of this argument, I will assume the price never changes over those 5 years. In practice that's unlikely, but I honestly don't know if it'll go up due to inflation or if Microsoft will introduce higher tier options and drop the prices of these existing ones over time. Could go either way. £138 per month for 60 months is £8,280. Those prices exclude VAT, so we need to add another 20%, bringing us to £9,936. And if it performs like the Azure ones with the same specification, then we'll get absolutely decimated by my £940 computer. It gets worse, because I still need a computer to access the cloud PC, so I should probably throw in the cost of a cheap laptop as well. The cheapest one on Dell's website is £279, so the total comes to £10,215. Ouch! Now you might point out that my computer is a desktop, so it needs a monitor which comes included with the laptop. This is true, however, if I was to be using this laptop instead of my desktop, I'd still be wanting my keyboard, mouse and monitors. So actually I'd need to add in the cost of a docking station as well. I won't do that. Some people will be happy with a small monitor and a trackpad, some won't, so I'll call it a wash. You also get charged for outbound data transfer if you use the Enterprise Edition, whereas the business version comes with a data allowance. You should check that allowance, but for this comparison I'll assume we stay within the business edition's included data and I won't add any additional bandwidth charges. Based on these numbers and what I believe the hardware to be, the Windows 365 Cloud PC is ludicrously bad value. You're paying nearly 11 times the price for half the capacity and a third of the performance. This is not how you're supposed to use it though. It's not to replace your home PC, it's for business. That does make a difference, so let's redo our calculations and take another look. Firstly, let's get rid of that laptop. This is a controversial step and I'm not sold on it myself, but it does play into a use case for cloud PCs. I've already ripped the pricing apart, so this time I want to give it a good chance. Both my wife and I have worked jobs in the past where we had to supply our own computer. In both cases, it was very inappropriate from a security perspective and purely down to the employer being a cheapskate. Post-pandemic though, I think we're likely to see more of this. There are a lot more jobs popping up that are 100% remote, and I suspect some companies will be saying that as well as having an internet connection, you also need to have a device capable of accessing a cloud PC. Whilst it wasn't appropriate when I had to do it, these days it can be done safely by giving the employee a managed cloud PC. You're not telling them to work on their own device, they're just using it to get access. I'm not saying I necessarily agree with that approach, there's a minefield of potential discrimination and responsibility there. But if companies were trying it before there was a way of doing it securely, they'll definitely do it now. The other cost I'm going to remove is the VAT, because unless you're a really small business, you can claim that back. Finally, I'm going to swap the top tier PC for something a bit cheaper. I think the two most likely candidates for your average office worker will be the 2 vCPU model with 8GB of RAM and 256GB of storage, and the 4 vCPU model with 16GB of RAM and 512GB of storage. Below that, and Microsoft themselves seem to indicate it's only appropriate for light and temporary use. So if you're office based, this seems like the absolute bare minimum with the 2 vCPUs, which, remember, is probably equivalent to a hyper-threaded single-core processor. Price-wise, I'll split the difference. If we assume half of each model, then it averages to £67.75 per person per month. You can save a bit of money using the Windows Hybrid benefit if the device used to access the Cloud PC has Windows 10 Pro on it. But in this scenario, I've removed the cost of the laptop, under the assumption users are going to be bringing their own devices. We can't assume everyone has Windows 10 Pro at home, and the hybrid benefit won't save enough to pay for the laptop, so this is still the cheapest option. I'm also going to measure the cost over 3 years this time rather than 5. 5 years is how long my personal computers tend to last before I feel the need to splurge on an upgrade. But a lot of companies will routinely replace devices after 3 years. Some of you might think that's a bit crazy, and surely most of them must still work fine after 3 years. Yes, The idea is to replace them while they still work fine, rather than after they start to break and you're incurring disruption and spending time repairing them. Could you push them further? Yes. But we're comparing this against a cloud PC where you never have to deal with hardware issues at all. As we've already seen, you do pay a premium for that. So if we're choosing between a 3 and a 5-year hardware replacement on the other side of the page, it's fair to select the one that reduces the likelihood of hardware issues as being most comparable. Over 3 years then, our cloud PCs cost £2,439 each. Let's grab another laptop from Dell to compare against. I'm not going to try and match the specifications exactly because Dell don't sell laptops with a partial share of a server of CPU in them. That's not a thing. Here's one that will do: quad-core 11th Gen i5 processor, 8GB of RAM and a 256GB NVMe SSD. At first glance it looks close to the lower tier cloud PC we'd picked because of the RAM and storage capacity, but in terms of performance it will likely outperform both of them. I do want to make a tweak to its warranty though. I'm going to max it out with a 3-year Pro support, next business day on-site service, and accidental damage protection. The reason for this is because, again, hardware issues. The cloud PC shouldn't have hardware failures, because if anything breaks it will automatically get moved to different hardware. Obviously we can't do it with a physical device, but by selecting the top 3-year warranty they offer, and then replacing the device as soon as the warranty runs out, we basically make it so dealing with hardware failures isn't our problem, which is the closest approximation I can make to a cloud PC where you should never even be aware of hardware failures happening. Total price, £830.80. Okay, the cloud PC is still expensive. It's 3 times the price of the laptop over 3 years. That's much better than 11 times the price, but still a bit ouch. There are some additional benefits worth considering though. Security for starters. You can protect the cloud PC much more easily than a physical device. Nobody can physically steal it. Nobody can attempt local attacks like booting from a USB drive. If something goes wrong, it's a doddle to redeploy. And as we've already mentioned, there's no requirement to do any form of hardware maintenance or support. You also don't need to keep any spare devices around just in case. I don't know if you spotted it on the Dell website, but the lead time when I looked was nearly 2 months for delivery. With the cloud PC it's more like 2 minutes, so you have way more flexibility. If you get the specification wrong, who cares, you can upgrade it in seconds. You know those jokes in YouTube comments about downloading more RAM? Yeah, that's basically a thing now. Pay Microsoft a bit more to upgrade your license, and they'll allocate a bit more RAM from their data center to your PC. This all makes supporting remote users far easier with a cloud PC. With all of that time freed up from mundane maintenance, think of all the business value your IT team could be delivering instead. You have to factor this in as well. Yes, these cloud PCs are expensive, but these other factors all play into the total cost of ownership. It's not just about the purchase price. Some of this is a double-edged sword, of course. A couple of years back before the world ended, I would regularly travel to London, lugging my laptop with me. With a cloud PC, I wouldn't have needed to bring it. I could rock up at our London office empty-handed, sit down at a desk and connect to my cloud PC. I don't need my computer, I just need any computer. This sounds good, but there's a downside. It's a 3-hour train journey to get there and the same again to get back. If I've got a laptop with me, I can do some work during that time. Not with a cloud PC. Same goes for when I'm in a hotel. No laptop, no cloud PC, no work. Even if I bring my own device on the train so I can access my cloud PC, it's pointless because the signal is so intermittent it would be simply unusable. Cloud PCs are hugely flexible, as long as you have a reliable internet connection. If you can't guarantee that, then your cloud PC may as well not exist. Okay, I hear you say, there are additional benefits to factor into the total cost of ownership when considering Windows 365. But even in the scenario where you played to their strengths, they're still triple the price of a laptop. Yeah, the Windows 365 stuff isn't cheap any way you look at it. One of the things you're paying for here is simplicity. If you want to go down the cloud PC route and your IT team are strong technically, you might want to give this a miss and look at Azure Virtual Desktops instead. They're basically the same thing, but there's a fair bit more complexity to setting them up. The flip side is you get more control. That's more control over the environment and configuration, but also control over the price. If you do a like-for-like comparison, Windows 365 is actually cheaper per device. It's also a fixed price, whereas Azure Virtual Desktop pricing varies based on utilization. If you operate them like for like though, you're doing it wrong. Windows 365's pricing is simple by comparison, but you have a fixed price per person. There are some benefits to pricing based on utilization though, even if it's less predictable. Think about it. Why are you paying for the use of a cloud PC when you're asleep? With Windows 365, it's permanently allocated to you whether you need it or not. With Azure, you can have it shut down when it's not needed and stop paying. That's potentially a significant cost saving compared to Windows 365 if you can turn a large chunk of your bills off outside of working hours. If you have people on different shifts, you can have them share devices as well. Not with Windows 365 because it's priced per user, so you'd pay for both of them. So Windows 365 PCs are very expensive, they don't perform very well, and they're less flexible than Azure Virtual Desktops. Apart from to cloud fanboys with teams of remote workers, is there any scenario where I would recommend them? Yes. What about temporary work? They're expensive over 3 years, but what if you only need them for a month? If you have a short-term contractor for a month or two, then you can spin up a cloud PC, and once they're done, you just bin it off and stop paying. This, I think, is probably the best use case for a cloud PC, where it's efficient, secure, and actually cost-effective. Personally, I have no intention of replacing my desktop with a 10 grand cloud PC that performs like junk. That's really not the scenario it's targeted at. Once you factor in remote working and total cost of ownership arguments, I can see businesses going for this even though it seems like a bit of a rip-off. For temporary workers like contractors, it makes a lot of sense. Let me know what you think of it. I've heard people describing it as a game changer. But honestly, I don't know what games these people have been playing because to me it's just another desktop as a service VDI offering. Always interested to hear what you guys think though, so let me know in the comments. While you're down there, give the like button a bit of love and check you've not forgotten to subscribe because that would be terrible. Thanks for stopping by and thanks for watching to the end. I will see you next time.